Hey there, we're the Fab Crew back again with our second episode where today we're going to be covering how to start approaching major and major macro strategies and micro decisions, which are basically just pure definition if you haven't heard before. A macro strategy is how am I going to approach a game on an overall level? Like, what is my general strategy across the course of an entire game? Whereas a micro decision or a micro strategy is how do you evaluate what you should be doing on like a single action basis within a game to accomplish a macro strategy. So I'm Alan. I'm back with Andrew. Andrew, welcome back.
Hello. My mic's working.
Improvement took episode 2. Yep. Okay. Cool. Here we are. So okay. So admittedly, um, big caveat. You just got your Silver Age deck, your $20 ticket to the World Tour, as LSS likes to market. Wait, it's your $20 ticket to the $2 million World Tour, right?
I don't
I
remember the
got it.
exact money amount, but
I got the tagline. I probably don't, but I got it. Okay. Anyway, so okay, so you just got your Silver Age deck, and you're kind of looking to it. So first up, I would say this should apply after you've had some time to sit down and just jam like a couple of games minimum with it. You need to know what your cards do before you can start approaching this, and just like basic interactions, which admittedly it doesn't take a heck of a lot of time. It's just something. But so once you've done that, and once you are ready to kind of step it up and think, I want to improve my game at this deck, Andrew, how do you start approaching your macro strategy with a new deck?
well, that's a great thing, Alan. The macro strategy can be different across any deck, so I got to figure that out first. So I think there are some great things, resources to figure out what exactly you're going to do with the deck. Armory decks anymore, when you buy one, come with most of them come with like a little insert now of like this is he did a finger, maybe he has one right there.
Okay, I think I got one still.
Okay.
Like,
But they come with like a little insert, like this is what the deck is trying to do, and this is what you want to do with it. You might find there's one for gravy.
the gravy bones, yeah.
Oh dear. You might
Yeah.
find there are content creators or YouTubers that put out deck text and they talk about what you want to be doing with the deck. You may have an idea of what you want to do that you think's fun. Maybe you've done something in an armory with it and you've seen success with it, and like this is what I want to do and this is how I want to play. So the first thing in establishing any deck is figuring out what your macro strategies are. And sometimes the macro strategies aren't necessarily the deck themselves, but how the deck interacts with another deck. So, one thing that we were talking about a little bit ago was the matchup between Dash.io and Gravy.
Mhm.
Gravy can output a ton of damage and get allies on the board and make it really hard to really do anything about. But Dash.io outputs a ton of damage, and she just keeps that coming, and then you have no blocks in your hand, and you just start taking more damage. Setting up ways to fatigue Dash.io. She's a very fatigable deck with Gravy. Under the right rules and conditions, he can handle aggro pretty well. You want to figure out how you work turn to turn, so those micro strategies to fatigue Dash.io, which is going to be your macro strategy. So coming into that matchup, you probably want to go first because you don't want Dash.io to set up, make a board state that's going to go over whatever you have for blocks. The first priority you should have as Gravy is you should get gold on the field because you want to be able to, you have an ally in your hand, you want to get it out.
And something to note is when you're devising these macro strategies or making these micro decisions is so it changes matchup to matchup. Like your deck, you might be registering the same 80 cards and your approach of your macro strategy different from deck to deck. And that's something to be cognizant of, and that's part of where like the leveling up your testing and testing into a range of different things comes in where it's unreasonable to test into every hero, but testing into different heroes that require different macro strategies can be good. Where it's like, okay, I need to test into someone that's trying to fatigue me. I'm going to test into but I have limited time. I'm testing into like this specific fatigue deck so I can see if this macro strategy of trying to set up this ridiculous combo turn to push over the defenses works. And like you don't necessarily need to run that back, but you need to make sure that at a base level that strategy does work and you can implement it consistently. And the other thing too is, so when you sit down to do this, is you would need to be cognizant of your strategy. Like when you present your hero, your sideboarding is, it helps a bunch when you are thinking about this and you have that idea, like you have that little brainchild of how am I going to approach this in your head, rather than just kind of like thinking it back and forth. And that's kind of where you start to level up from knowing the deck to mastering the deck. And importantly is your macro strategy can even change mid game, and sometimes it should. How do you identify that? And that's where practice comes in. And you want to have that. You want to have those reps to be able to understand. Okay, at what point should I start evaluating whether I should change this? Is like the game going poorly? Is just that's not working? Am I dying way too quickly, or does this thing seem unachievable? And being able to evaluate. Okay, either stick with it and finish out the game and did that work, or change it and be like, okay, I was going to try to fatigue this Dash.io with Gravy, but she's killing me way too quickly. I have to send damage. Did that work? And it's like being able to evaluate after during the game and after the game is how well did that play out? And so you can't note take at any LSS sanctioned event except for your life total. But sitting down directly after the game and either writing it down yourself, like after the match, or if your opponent is friendly and willing to talk about it, is talking about it with them and trying to get a handle on how well that played out. Is like, did you start blocking and they were like, awesome, he's blocking now, I'm just going to run him over? Or was it like, okay, he started blocking and now I can't do anything? Like, there's a lot of information to be gained from really being able to dissect specific instances of your gameplay like that. And it's best to pick specific topics of your game to dissect rather than everything as a whole, because if you try and approach the whole game, that is too much information and it's hard to pull something useful out of that without being able to focus on something, at least to start out with. Once you have enough repetition on something, a lot of it becomes more autopilot, like your turn to turn, what card are you pitching, what card are you playing, or how are you blocking, that it's easier to dissect the whole thing. But starting out, definitely pick your moments, pick your battles, and pick your individual spots to target. That's how I approach it. I don't know. Do you do something different? That whenever I stay focused on that, that's where I'm the most successful.
Yeah, I want to sit down and want to go into a match with that. I also think it's really important to note off that when you're reevaluating your plan, I'm going to bring up Vincent as an example. I usually, for a lot of heroes, I have a better time if I just play aggressively against Vincent and hope that she doesn't get the thing. But inevitably, Vincent can run you over. If you try to pivot your game plan when you're at 30 life, you're probably going to have more success versus when you try to pivot your game plan because you're at 5 life. Well, yeah, fatigue doesn't work because you didn't have any room for error. You didn't have any room to not draw perfectly in that situation. So I think what's really important with that is not just having the game plan, but having the game plan of, when do you reassess the game plan? When is this something that you need to reevaluate and do something different? Or is doing something different an option?
Well, and again, especially with something like Vincent, is like, let's say you do start the game being like, I think I can fatigue this Vincent. As there might be turns where it's looking like, wow, I just leaked like 10 plus damage. I don't think I can do this. And it's like, okay, being able to evaluate, okay, was this was this going to happen, or is this like within the margin of acceptable, even though it's like not ideal for me? Because it's like the Vincent might hit you for 10 damage, eat your arsenal, eat a card from hand, and you're like, oh crap, I can't fatigue her anymore. But that's part of the game plan. Is like, okay, she's going to have those turns like that. How do you handle that turn, and then how do you handle the turns in between? And is that an acceptable level of her leaking damage through that, like that you can handle it? And so you don't want to get too jumpy with being willing to switch. Is you do have to be able to like commit and understand that it's not going to go perfectly. And heck, even happens with aggro too. You draw a hand that doesn't function, and you spend 3 cards to send 4. It's going to happen.
Assessing your plan. I don't think it's something you can do like they're going to send 12 and then I'll die, so I need to pivot to this. That will always result in you being on the back foot and not getting any ground, unless you just happen to draw into the right things. I think you need to be able to assess what you have left in your deck consistently. You should, one of the things that I think is really great. I started off with Flesh and Blood is my first competitive TCG, but I started off my TCG with experience with Star Wars Destiny, which had a 30 card deck, and I played Boba Fett and Jango Fett as a pair, and that some of my favorite Star Wars characters, and I. With it being a 30 card deck, the deck changed a little bit throughout sets and throughout the meta, but not significantly. With the 30 card deck, if you had a 5 card hand, and let's say I used every card each turn, which I didn't, but let's say that I used every card each turn, that allots me 6 turns. If everything in there was a double, so it was a 2 of, I have 15 cards in the deck. It didn't take long to understand that I really had, those cards, like these were my out cards. I had my Hunt Them Down, Armed to the Teeth. Those are my cards that, like, my opponent is definitely going to kill me. Here's where I pull a Haymaker out of nowhere. And I had to have a plan to how to set up to do that. With Flesh and Blood, it can be a little bit more daunting because Silver Age is 40 cards. If you go into CC, it's a 60 card minimum. So now you're trying to understand, what you do from everything. And it's easy for me to think of Brute because Brute has a lot of different cards that have utility. So Blood Rush Bellow is the popular Brute card, right? I can't think of a Brute that doesn't have Blood Rush in their deck. And then another option we have is Wild Ride. Wild Ride is another, go again card. It's 2 for 6, go again, and now you have 6 cards. Well, maybe you need Bare Fangs because you don't need go again, but you need something that is going to deal tall damage, or maybe you need something to deal tall damage after the go again. So now 9 cards. Beast Within. You have 3 Beast Withins in your deck to draw a card off the discard. So now you have 12 cards down. Swing Big is another 2 card 8. Great. It just has a good block value. Not a lot of Brute cards block. 3 is a good standard value. 2 card 8, so good on offense. Now you have a quarter of your deck memorized, and then you start to do that incrementally. Maybe you have 6 Wild Rides in your deck. There's all these little things that you can do to boil down your deck. And then as you start looking through your deck, so if you're in Silver Age, this is a lot easier. In CC, it's a little bit harder, but let's say you're in Silver Age and you went through 10 cards. And 10 cards are in your graveyard, you've pitched 2 cards down. So that means that you have 28 cards left in your deck that you have not seen. Of those 28 cards, let's say you're looking for Wild Rides, and there are 4 of them in your deck. So you have 4 out of 28. So that is a 1 in 7 chance that you're going to draw a Wild Ride next turn. You can constantly do that math, and you can do it easier as you go through more cards, as long as you keep track of cards you've went through.
Yeah. I mean, how I tend to approach it is like similar, but even a level deeper is rather than thinking of specific cards, is you think about the functions that specific cards serve. Like your wild rides. Your wild rides are your sources of go again. They're how you make your turn do more damage. Like how you go above attacking for 6 or 8 in brute is you do a wild ride and then you do a thing. That's what I would say. That's your aggressive go again. You might have other cards like Buck Wild. That's your aggressive go again piece. But you might maybe not brute, but you might have in CC you might have Sink Below or Faithless in your deck. You know, those are obvious ones. These are my defensive cards, or and then you have like your blues that serve different functions utility, and then you can basically silo your cards into like what that function serves and where that serves, and then you pick like and you might memorize the best cards in that class first. So for instance, I'm Guardian pilled, so I'm gonna go Jarl. Disruptive cards. My marquee disruptive card is Oakenold. And so like that's like the top class of my disruptive attack. And then I got other disruptive cards, like I got my Felling, I got my Command and Conquers, I got my Erase Faces. But I'm like, I know the functions that those serve. What I say?
See, you didn't say plow.
It's in there. It showcases how far down my list it is. No, which is probably a problem. But anyway, but basically then it helps you like figure out, okay, you don't even have to think of specific cards when you get to that level. You can think of, okay, how many disruptive pieces do I have left in my deck? Or how many defensive pieces do I have left? How many blues do I have? And then you can evaluate larger, and that can inform, okay, I think I got disruptive pieces coming up, even without knowing the specific card. And then you can kind of use that to inform how you're approaching your turn-to-turn decisions. So, then that's honestly usually how I approach it. And then it's, and then one last piece I would like to add about the macro game plan and switching it is my most success in figuring out what the correct overall macro game plan is not switching it mid-game, but switching it different games, same matchup. Like, again, I'm Guardian Pilled, I'm going to go Jarl. If I'm going Jarl into Finset, well, yeah, okay, Jarl into Dash, I might approach the game differently, 2 separate games, and see how it plays out. One game I tried Fatiguer, one game I tried Disruptor, and see what plays out. And like then you can kind of evaluate, okay, these were the strengths, these were the weaknesses from approaching this differently, and how did it play out? And I think that's the best way to do it, because you can only switch mid game when it is correct. Because if you're trying to dance between two if you're trying to dance between two strategies in the middle of the game, you will not be successful. It is something that you reserve as a tool in your arsenal that you don't pull out.
I think one thing you can do to really maximize deciding on the game plan and making sure it's correct is you have a lot of public information that is readily available to you. There are some sources out there that you probably know when you get paired into a match. If you're attending an armory, you're probably going to play against the same brute player 3 or 4 times, or the same. I'm picking on brute tonight. I don't know why. I don't play brute.
It's a good class to pick on.
Yeah. You probably know Blood Rush Bellow. You probably know if a player has played one or not. You probably know if you weathered all 3 or if you just weathered one. You can check their graveyard. You know how many cards are in their graveyard. Ultimately, you can estimate that they've probably at least pitched 1 card a turn. Even if you're not doing hard math and counting all these cards and watching. So, approximately what turn is it? Okay, so if it's turn 7, they've at least pitched 7 cards. Unless, they took a turn off. Maybe they've done 2 attacks, so then each turn, that's going to be 16, if it's turn 7, 14 cards to the bottom. And then count their graveyard. So 10 cards in graveyard. Now you have 24 cards that they've seen. If they've brought in 60, then you can start to do the math. 36 cards that blood rush can be within. Same thing with my deck. If I'm looking at something that, maybe I am looking at a plan where I'm going to attack, and I notice like, okay, I have 13 blues in my deck, and I need to be able to send these cards, which cost 2, and I have 10 blues in my graveyard. I know that they're probably not those blues. There are 3 blues in my deck. Have I seen them? Have I pitched in any way, or have I just blocked? So if I haven't seen them yet, then maybe I can make a plan on that, depending on how many cards I have left. But if, that could also really be telling if you're blocking with all your blues. Now you have reds that have a cost to them and you don't have anything to pitch for them. Granted, I think, in that situation we could talk more about deck building, but that's more of kind of an extreme example.
Yeah, no, it's like informative to what your strategy should be, and knowing how unfortunately, in order to like devise it fully, devising a full large game strategy, the best way to do it is online resources. Common one, it's when you're first getting your feet wet, but like when you're still learning how to even go about devising your own or how to implement your own. So a couple of spots where you can commonly find these resources. First of all is the Fab TCG homepage. If you're lucky, there's been an article with your hero. They commonly have pro players come in and write masterclass articles on decks where even if you're not running that specific deck list for a hero, it can inform you certain play patterns of like a specific hero and how that's approached. Failing that, Fabrary, Fabrary, is it's an online deck building tool that has stats that can inform card choices. It can inform card choices being included in decks, which if you are able to understand and contextualize those cards, you can extrapolate what people are trying to do sometimes if you're lucky. It's not always a given. And then the last one is Fab Blazing, which that is the same thing where it will be able to you'll be able to see how specific hero matchups are playing out and the cards that are getting included in people's decks commonly. So again, you can use that to kind of to copy someone else's homework and to see what have they been doing. Has this been working? Okay, they're including. I don't know. Again, I'm staying Guardian pilled. Blizzard does Blizzard actually do something into the Skogan matchup, or does they just like not even matter?
That's only y'all of the Guardians.
Yeah, he's not wrong. Yeah, but
Well, hold on.
We'll have a rant podcast where I rant for days about the other ones and Jarl. But anyway, so you can use that as quick tools to be able to extrapolate, and it also helps you with your initial deck builds and kind of being able to like edit your first deck that you might just copy paste or get from a friend. And then the tools within specifically Fabrary and then the online testing site Talishar that I commonly use to evaluate how a card is applying to my specific strategy is I commonly look at there's a tool that tells you how often a card is pitched with, blocked with, or played. And depending on what function it is commonly serving might inform is it doing its job in the deck, and like yes or no, is it doing its job, and then also how well is it doing. If I am blocking with this red attack all the time, I might want to reevaluate what function is this card serving. Those are my go-to tools, at least. Just quick, dirty. I'm like trying to power through and figure something out. First baby steps.
So we've talked a lot going in through this about macro strategies, and I kind of learned this that psychology background. Blue and red was the thing. So when you the study was back, red is a very aggressive color and evokes immediate response. So people tended to do better. So if you think of video games, the red team was always better in Call of Duty, where they're trying to get points by shooting the other team. because red has immediate plan. Those people were immediately looking to fulfill a goal. And if you think of something like Age of Empires, the blue team actually typically did better because they went for a longer strategy, because blue is apparently a common color. So blue went for a long-term plan. Red went for a short-term plan. We've talked a lot about the blue, the long-term plans. So Alan, let me poke you with this question. What's a red plan, or what's a micro strategy that you may talk about?
So the first one that comes up to is admittedly a Redline deck, Syndra. Syndra, your overall strategy is fairly similar game to game. You're trying to kill someone by sending 0 for 3 attacks over and over and over again and doing it until they die. But the small points that I like, even most people would consider Syndra a really simple deck, and I would agree. But some of the individual points that I would try and pick out as a red strategy is, okay, I have a couple of my attacks that they are 0 for 3 with go again, or ones that can be 0 for 4 with go again, or ones that have an on hit, ones that don't. Is figuring out on the specific turn when I have this mix of different attacks that are, they sort of the overall same function, but they do slightly different things. Is how am I going to order those and sequence those where I accomplish my overall strategy the best. So let's say I am trying to. Let's say my overall goal is I'm trying to leak tiny bits of damage because I know that's all I'm going to get on the turn. That might inform the order in which I send those attacks. Because if I can pick up on my opponent's blocking patterns, I can know, okay, this one's going to get over by a point. They usually don't block this attack, so maybe I can sneak in another point here. Probably going to want to block this one, so I'm going to put that where I'm okay having it blocked anyway. And then also your flick knives in that deck. Where am I going to use my flick knives to sneak in that extra damage and keep in a chain link that counts as hitting? And that will change. That is the thing that will change, is figuring out how I'm going to sequence those. So, gosh, it's been so long since I played Syndra, I can't remember a specific Syndra hand. But basically understanding how I can send all those attacks in a turn. So, the order in which I send them is going to change depending on what large strategy I'm trying to accomplish.
So if I could go in with that and just piggyback on a little bit, I think we can talk about Mask of Momentum.
Yep.
Your plan each turn should be making Mask draw a card. So your red plan, so your micro plan, immediately, do you have a starter? So immediately you want to think of, what can I do to start my turn? Sometimes it's attack with a dagger. Sometimes you have a Ronin Renegade. From there, that first attack is probably not going to be blocked because the other person wants to block the second or third hit to make sure that Mask doesn't draw. So then, what do you have that can mix things up so that the second or third attack, or an attack after the third in a row on that chain link will hit, so you can draw a card? So your micro plan becomes a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger until you start to look turn to turn, and you're really starting to think of what cards, if I'm playing against Jarl, my macro plan is also going to be, I'm going to do a lot of damage, but I'm also looking to weather his blizzards or his hypothermias to stop my go again, or maybe I'm worried about a crumble taking away my mask. So at what points am I going to have to deal with this? When am I going to hit the gas? When can I hit the gas? And when do I need to woe? And what's more relevant with that is the Marionette Slippy matchup, in where you need to have those 90 reacts to stop out a little bit of damage when you can send some more back. But Marionette really just wants to keep her down to a 3-card hand. And so if, Syndra's D-react, and that's a boon to him. So sometimes your micro plan might also be working into the other person's micro plan for you. I don't know. That's a lot of
no.
That's a long road to go down.
Well, and we've talked. Well, to not go down it further, but we've talked about when you should adjust your macro plan. But that's when adjusting the micro plan can help serve the macro plan. Is understanding how well does the thing you're doing turn to turn serve your overarching game plan. Like, let's keep going with the Syndra thing. I know I'm playing against a Marinette. They want to keep me down to 3 cards. Like, okay. How do I play in sequence where I don't let him keep me down to 3 cards all the time? Do I maybe I need to pick a couple key turns to sacrifice to go down to 1 or no cards so that I can have the turns later to play 5 cards. And picking those spots, which it's hard to do. It is contextual, but utilizing your arsenal well is immense in that matchup. And knowing when to let that go, because they're going to be threatening that arsenal a lot. And what points should you not even bother trying to keep one? But being able to evaluate that mid-game is one of the key things to understanding that matchup, per se.
In kind of another one that we talked a little bit ago, Gravy. Having gold so you can, the micro plan is I have this hand of 4 cards. If someone's coming at me, I need to block it to stay alive if they're an aggro deck. But you also need to think about your macro plan of I need to make gold this turn so that when I have a significant bad hand that I can bail out of it, or my opponent sends in this ton of damage, I need to make sure I can get a D-React arsenal. So maybe I'm cycling through my cards really fast to look for that D-React. Or maybe I just want gold so I can, get out of my hand really quick an ally to put a blocking card there. So there are a lot of different ways that you can handle this. And so you need to look at your micro to make your macro work. Am I going to make gold this turn? Do I need gold? Okay, I have gold. I'm just going to sit on 1 or 2 gold. Can I make more? Okay, now that I've weathered the wrath of, it's banned now, but I've weathered the wrath of retribution turn, or maybe it's the gone on a flash turn from Macilio. What life do I have left? What leeway can I give before I start going aggressive, or do I need to play tentatively a little bit? Or maybe I need to find ways with Loot the Hold or Conquer of the High Seas to force some disruption. Can I take a little bit of damage for that? Those are all big questions to ask as you're constantly playing.
Well, and those are the questions that honestly they bridge the gap between the massive overarching plan and the turn to turn, or not even turn to turn, action to action. Does this card block, pitch, or play? And asking those questions is how you connect those two. So, with that, I don't have any more to add on this topic. I think large level between aside from being able to jam games and evaluate hero to hero how you should be approaching this, I don't have anything else high level. Anything else you would like to add?
Go play Flesh and Blood. It'd be the best decision you make today.
Yep, which
unless you want to buy a lottery ticket.
Which definitely gotta make sure to do the plug. If you want to play Flesh and Blood, the Cards Are Us server Discord. Discord link will be in the description. Link will be in the description, right? You join the Discord. We do host online webcam armories and leagues every month, where they are pretty casual. It's a $10 entry. 1 gem pack participation and then pack per win. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yep. Shipped to you.
Shipped to you. But it's a good way to play, to understand. Most of everyone that I've come across in there is pretty friendly, and it's a good way to start practicing these. So if you're interested in getting some games in at home from the comfort of your desk, please check it out. Sign up for a league. Sign up for one of the armories. And this is where I need to double check our scheduling. Could you tell me when the next armory is coming up?
Monday, the whatever the Monday that's next is, the 18th.
18th.
Monday the 18th, and
At
that'll be Silver Age at 9 p.m. Eastern. But the new leagues will start again in June, and they'll probably be legal for omens. So, all kinds of exciting things.
so, yep. If you're interested, please check out the description. We look forward to seeing you there. And otherwise, this is the Fab Crew signing off.
Yay!